Tehran committed an unforgivable miscalculation within the Strait of Hormuz, one that threatens to unravel every strand of its regional strategy. The waterway, reopened on April 17th, was sealed shut again a mere 24 hours afterward. Citing the American interdiction effort unfolding in those waters, the Iranian leadership choked off Hormuz and directed live ammunition at commercial vessels navigating the choke point. Over open radio frequencies, Revolutionary Guard commanders broadcast a chilling proclamation to global shipping. Every hull is considered hostile until the encirclement ceases. Yet the Guard Corps remained oblivious to the price that would follow their brazen maneuver, for Washington demonstrated across international broadcasts that this encirclement was not merely rhetorical posturing. On April 19th, an enormous silhouette materialized upon the swells of the Gulf of Oman. This was the 275-meter Iranian-flagged freighter MV Tusca, a vessel already designated by Treasury officials for prior illicit conduct, and displacing nearly as much mass as a fleet carrier. Tusca sought to pierce the naval cordon and reach the docks at Bandar Abbas. The guided missile destroyer USS Spruance, an Arleigh Burke-class warship conducting surveillance, shadowed the freighter for precisely 6 hours. Urgent transmissions crackled across the maritime bands. Motor vessel Tusca, abandon your engineering spaces. Abandon your engineering spaces. We are authorized to employ disabling ordnance. The Iranian bridge crew disregarded every caution and held steadfast to their heading. That instant triggered the unprecedented response, footage that Central Command would later disseminate frame by frame. Unleashing its 5-inch Mk-45 deck gun, the Spruance landed a round squarely into Tusca's machinery spaces, paralyzing the giant ship's motive force. Once the freighter sat dead in the swells, Marine elements from the 31st Expeditionary Unit swarmed aboard and established complete command. This action entered official logs as the inaugural instance of live fire and physical seizure since the interdiction mandate commenced on April 13th. Immediately afterward, Donald Trump issued a blunt warning via his Truth Social platform, declaring that a substantial rupture had been blasted into the vessel's power plant and that the hold contents were undergoing minute-by-minute scrutiny. Through this single engagement, the United States executed a decisive step toward forcing Hormuz open once more. But this represents merely the visible crest of a submerged mountain, because American officials signaled that halting one Iranian cargo carrier would not suffice. The operational envelope would widen. According to privileged reporting by the Wall Street Journal, the Defense Department has initiated a sweeping effort to interdict every tanker tied to Iranian interests navigating global sea lanes during the forthcoming period. The United States is funneling its premier combat formations into the theater in rapid succession, each designated to board and secure Iranian-affiliated hulls. Arleigh Burke-class escorts, the 31st Marine Expeditionary Contingent, SEAL strike teams, Seahawk rotor craft, and the big-deck amphibious platform USS Tripoli all converged upon the operating area under a unified directive. Joining this array were the carriers USS Abraham Lincoln and USS Gerald R. Ford, the latter returning to the Red Sea accompanied by Super Hornet squadrons, F-35 Sea Lightning Roman II, and P-8 Poseidon maritime surveillance planes, artificial intelligence-driven systems belonging to Task Force 59, commenced digitally cataloging every watercraft drawing breath inside Hormuz. Presently, between 25 and 35 Iranian-associated tankers and support craft operating within Hormuz and the adjacent Gulf of Oman are being monitored on a second-by-second basis. Financial outlets including Bloomberg and the New York Post have characterized this maneuver as a fresh chapter in maritime interdiction, one whose tendrils stretch far past the Middle Eastern theater. After absorbing all this, the developing tableau is unmistakable. Hormuz has ceased functioning merely as a narrow sea passage. It has transformed into a worldwide hunting preserve. And the element guaranteed to rattle Tehran most profoundly is the realization that this pursuit has barely commenced. To fully grasp the chain of events leading to this flashpoint, one must rewind the clock to the dawn of April 18th. Roughly 24 merchant ships veered sharply toward Omani waters in evident distress. Amidst this bedlam, Revolutionary Guard units drew beads on no fewer than 3 petroleum carriers inside Hormuz. Additionally, the immense Suezmax-class Indian-flagged vessel Samar Herald, transporting 2 million barrels of Iraqi crude, found itself squarely within Iran's crosshairs. The regime in Tehran had explicitly authorized this tanker's passage, even listing the captain's name as the second entry on their clearance manifest. Recordings captured from the Samar Herald's bridge and relayed to tanker monitoring networks painted a portrait of sheer terror. As the vessel neared Omani coastal waters, Guard fast attack boats initiated fire without preamble. No prior hail, no radio query, no formal challenge existed. Within that same window, a box ship sustained damage from a stray projectile. All told, 3 commercial hulls were engaged, with at least one suffering confirmed physical impact. The international community witnessed, for the initial occasion, the true squalor of Tehran's operational playbook. It was within this volatile window that the foundation for America's seizure campaign inside Hormuz was solidified. Donald Trump disseminated a clip of Frank Sinatra performing My Way across his Truth social feed. Defense analysts and strategic observers decoded this act as a particularly pointed and suggestive signal that theater-wide maneuvers had been activated. So, can the sheer tonnage of American military hardware now amassed in Hormuz genuinely pry the waterway open? The combat power the Pentagon has mobilized within the strait surpasses any standard patrol rotation. This constitutes a concentration of naval and aerial assets unmatched in the Persian Gulf across recent decades. The backbone comprises the Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers, USS Michael Murphy and USS Frankie Peterson Jr. transited the strait early in the month, assuming forward screening duties. Trailing them, the planet's largest flat-top, USS Gerald R. Ford, re-entered the theater via the Red Sea corridor. The Ford advances with a pair of escorting destroyers and an embarked air arm of 90 combat-ready platforms. This carrier previously saw duty during Venezuelan contingencies and prior standoffs with Tehran. USS Abraham Lincoln operates within the same maritime basin, constituting a second substantial naval pillar. Put differently, the United States has positioned 2 full carrier striking formations directly beneath Iran's gaze. Simultaneously, the truly pivotal component of this scenario derives not from these capital vessels, but from the tankers gliding past them. Visit, board, search, and seizure detachments remain poised on the weather decks of every destroyer. Lower-risk interdictions might be assigned to these standard teams. For hulls that offer defiance, the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit activates. Much like the action against Tusca, this element sorties from the amphibious platform USS Tripoli and maintains specialized proficiency in opposed boarding scenarios. During high-stakes seizures, SEAL strike cells also deploy. Under this operational mandate, American commandos possess the capacity to fast rope onto decks from airborne platforms using MH-60R/S Seahawk airframes. These rotorcraft can launch from either destroyer helipads or amphibious well decks. The USS Lewis B. Puller represents the ultimate tripwire in this murky panorama. This expeditionary sea-base vessel hosts special operators and AH-64 Apache gunships within the region. The Apaches have been dispatched on proactive interdiction sorties aimed at Iran's swarms of fast inshore attack boats. In essence, the American administration is methodically spinning a comprehensive blockade matrix across Hormuz. While naval surface elements account for every conceivable threat vector, the aerial canopy overhead stretches far wider. F/A-18 Super Hornets and F-35C Lightning Roman II airframes guarantee command of the skies, launching from the flight decks of the deployed carriers. P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol platforms are capturing every acoustic anomaly beneath the surface. MQ-4C Triton high-altitude drones maintain uninterrupted surveillance orbits for extended durations. KC-135 and KC-46, a Pegasus tanker aircraft, keep the fuel reserves of this sprawling airborne armada perpetually replenished. Over the preceding two-day span, the frequency of C-17 Globemaster Roman III heavy transport movements into the Middle East attained unprecedented volume. The tally of cargo aircraft inbound to the theater registered no fewer than 8, while outbound flights numbered at least 6. Numerous KC-135R and KC-46A refueling platforms have been tracked continuously across European and Middle Eastern flight corridors. According to Flightradar 24 telemetry, the predominant aircraft type under global tracking on April 18th consisted overwhelmingly of American aerial tankers. The relocation of F-35, a Lightning Roman II squadrons from RAF Lakenheath to Gulf airfields, represents the most tightly secured facet of this entire undertaking. Verification exists confirming no fewer than 18 F-35 as shifted from British soil to Gulf bases. Complementing this move, F-15E Strike Eagle wings and A-10 Thunderbolt Roman II close support platforms were also cycled into the regional rotation. Yet for the Revolutionary Guard Corps presently menacing the Strait of Hormuz, the foremost dissuasive instrument will prove to be America's AI-enhanced robotic surveillance web blanketing the area. Washington has lately blended unmanned surface craft with algorithmic intelligence inside Hormuz, allowing autonomous sensor packages to extract simultaneously the acoustic fingerprint, infrared heat bloom, and hull silhouette of every vessel transiting the Narrows. Consequently, even if a ship repaints its flag, it remains identifiable by the unique cavitation noise generated by its screw. A tanker that disables its automatic identification system transponder receives an automated threat designation the instant it breaches a 5 nautical mile perimeter. The Gulf has been re-engineered into a biometric scanning apparatus rather than a conventional sea, silent, acute, and imperceptible to its targets. Put simply, Washington is sustaining 3 carrier strike formations at sea, 5 distinct classifications of combat jets aloft, and an AI-driven digital mesh, all functioning concurrently. This specific fusion of capabilities has never before been witnessed operating in such proximity and density across the Gulf's lengthy chronicles. And resting squarely at the nucleus of this entire accumulation resides one unvarnished reality: the likelihood of Iranian hulls maintaining anonymity upon international waterways has been compressed to absolute nil. A further crucial dimension of this force posture, beyond simply reopening Hormuz, centers on interdicting contraband flows. For countless years, Iran has utilized the sea not solely for petroleum exports, but also for funneling weaponry to Houthi rebels and Hezbollah proxies. Ballistic missile subcomponents, unmanned aircraft propulsion units, and cruise missile guidance packages all traverse these identical maritime arteries. America's asserted authority to board vessels translates directly into severing these channels with a singular action. Thus, the blockade cripples not only Iran's hydrocarbon income, but also its capacity to project proxy warfare. Should this logistical artery be clamped shut, Tehran's sway over peripheral conflicts could implode over the span of just several months. That reality explains why the strategic calculus of this endeavor extends dramatically past mere economic strangulation. It constitutes, in actuality, a scheme to asphyxiate an entire resistance network. And Washington intends to execute this blueprint while expending zero ordnance. The most noteworthy tactical nuance within this expansive operational design concerns the chosen geography. American planners intend to prosecute these boarding actions not within the cramped confines of Hormuz proper, but rather across the broader expanses of the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea. Inside the constricted strait, Iranian fast attack flotillas and shore-based missile emplacements retain the capacity for instantaneous reaction. Upon open blue water, however, American destroyers enjoy a full 360-degree field of fire and unequivocal sensor dominance. This geographic preference safeguards the well-being of U.S. service members, while simultaneously diminishing any Iranian pretense for vertical escalation. Another vital ingredient involves synchronization between Central Command and Indo-Pacific Command. Iranian crude consignments are shadowed not only within the Persian Gulf, but also throughout the Indian Ocean, the Strait of Malacca, and the South China Sea shipping lanes. Therefore, even if a tanker successfully exits Hormuz, it remains susceptible to renewed interdiction off the Malaysian coastline. This planetary tracking grid renders Iran's alternative routing methodologies utterly obsolete. Consequently, the situation confronting us presently represents a genuinely planetary-scaled Hormuz isolation and seizure campaign. Still, presuming this narrative advances entirely one-directionally would constitute a grave analytical error. This enormous American force accumulation confronts perils of comparable enormity. The Strait of Hormuz constitutes a constricted liquid corridor, merely 33 kilometers across at its narrowest. Inside this compressed conduit, the Revolutionary Guard Navy has been methodically hoarding its lopsided threat portfolio across multiple decades. The Iranian methodology, which strategic observers label as asymmetrical contamination, predicates itself upon unprovoked discharges and unpredictable target reallocation. The initial hazard comprises countless submerged explosive devices. Open-source appraisals suggest Tehran's mine reserves surpass 5,000 individual units. The preponderance of these devices activates via magnetic displacement and can inflict catastrophic impairment upon capital warships maneuvering within confined waters. To neutralize this peril, the United States has introduced autonomous subsurface vehicles into Hormuz. Robotic mine countermeasure platforms maintain persistent scans of designated threat corridors. Yet even the positive identification of a solitary mine can compel a destroyer to alter its navigational track for multiple hours. The second significant menace originates from the swarms of fast inshore attack craft. Iran maintains an inventory exceeding 180 such boats, the bulk of which are armed with guided rockets or anti-ship ordnance. These craft possess the capability to strike in unison from numerous vectors utilizing saturation methodology. Their objective is not necessarily to scuttle the adversary. The aim is to overwhelm fire control tracking and point defense mechanisms. Even though a destroyer's phalanx close-in weapon system can dispense 4,500 projectiles per minute, managing 30 distinct inbound signatures concurrently represents an entirely different mathematical problem. The tertiary stratum consists of the Ghadir-class coastal submarines. These boats can stage torpedo ambushes within shallow bathymetry and manage to evade numerous sonar detection arrays. Iran possesses upwards of 20 Ghadir hulls in its fleet. A further ring of jeopardy originates from truck-mounted anti-ship missile batteries deployed along the littoral periphery. Nor and Qader series munitions can engage surface contacts at ranges exceeding 200 kilometers. Concealed within wadis, cavern apertures, and adjacent to civilian structures, these launchers operate under a fire and displace doctrine. Mere moments following a missile's ignition, the erector assembly has already retreated toward a fresh coordinate. We must additionally acknowledge the continuously expanding fleet of unmanned aerial vehicles. Iran's Shahd and Mohajer drone lineages have undergone years of testing tailored for swarming offensives against carrier-striking formations. The unit expenditure for a Shahd 136 airframe approximates $20,000, whereas a single SM-2 interceptor round consumed in neutralizing it costs roughly $2 million. This economic disparity explains why the Pentagon has expedited the deployment of directed energy defense platforms to the Gulf, specifically to counter Iranian unmanned threats under a compartmented initiative. Within this stark tableau, it becomes evident that the United States is endeavoring to erect discrete protective perimeters against each threat stratum: autonomous subsurface platforms against moored mines, Apache gunships and Rodor craft against fast boat flotillas. The low observable targeting cascade of the F-35 fleet stands arrayed against coastal missile emplacements. Round-the-clock persistent intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance envelops the airspace above Hormuz. E-3 Sentry, AWACS platforms register every aerial twitch upon their scopes. E-11 Bakken aircraft integrate all battlefield communications via a unified nodal architecture. B-52 Stratofortress rotational sorties retain the inherent capacity to deliver punishing strikes against Tehran's foundational infrastructure, if circumstances dictate such a course. But arguably the most pivotal factor for the Iranian regime remains this: despite the accumulating hazards, Washington has demonstrated zero inclination to retreat by so much as a centimeter. The objective is starkly defined: reduce Iranian oil sales to a functional zero, compel the permanent unfettering of the Strait, and haul Tehran prostrate to the Atomic Bargaining Forum. These three ambitions will govern all forthcoming maneuvers. The initial portrait painted by the operation's opening phase already appears exceedingly grim for Iran. Nearly 90% of the Iranian national economy hinges upon seaborne commerce. Daily petroleum outflow fluctuates between 1.5 and 2 million barrels. The overwhelming share of this tonnage courses through Hormuz destined for Chinese refineries. Should the isolation effort achieve its maximal potential, 80 to 90% of this income stream could evaporate without warning. The projected near-term daily fiscal hemorrhage falls somewhere between $300 million and $500 million. For a financial apparatus propped up by military outlays, state subsidies, and domestic handouts, this predicament mirrors a meticulously induced cardiac seizure. Laden tankers queued at export hubs like Karg Island, Bandar Abbas, Chabahar, and Azalaye have transitioned from exception to standard operating procedure. The defense industrial portrait is strained with equal severity. The Revolutionary Guard Navy's monthly ordnance fabrication yield fails to approach the missile inventory carried aboard a single Ticonderoga-class cruiser. This implies that Iran's lopsided strategy was architected not for extended dissuasion, but for a singular, high-stakes ambuscade. Instead of stumbling headlong into that trap, Washington now pursues a policy of gradual desiccation, draining the pond entirely. Precisely at this inflection, the narrative vaults from the Gulf to the Pakistani capital of Islamabad. During the morning hours of April 19th, a pair of U.S. Air Force C-17 Globemaster Roman III strategic airlifters settled onto the tarmac at Nur Khan Air Base on the outskirts of Islamabad. The arterial routes extending from the aerodrome toward the city center experienced immediate lockdown. Islamabad's marquee lodgings, the Serena and the Marriott, cleared their guest rosters and halted all incoming reservations through week's end. Extensive protective protocols were enacted across Rawalpindi and Islamabad proper. Select thoroughfares and establishments were sealed entirely. The arresting detail resides here. Tehran had initially spurned a renewed dialogue mediated through Pakistani intermediaries. Yet the April 18th weapons release inside Hormuz, combined with the American ultimatum delivered during the early hours of April 19th, may have completely inverted Tehran's strategic calculus inside a single rotation of the clock. Trump broadcast the development openly across his Truth Social account. The initial session, convened within that same municipality on April 11th, had concluded in stalemate. However, this occasion sees the bargaining surface arrayed with an altogether distinct gravitational pull. The pronouncement issued by Trump during the April 19th morning hours communicated with absolute clarity the frequency upon which Washington now broadcasts. We are extending an exceptionally equitable arrangement. Should they refuse, the United States will annihilate every solitary power generation facility and every solitary bridge span within Iran. The era of restraint has concluded. The calculus grows increasingly knotty for Tehran. They shall either tender compromises from Islamabad and genuinely permit Hormuz to breathe, or they shall observe impotently as their maritime assets are commandeered within the very waters they presumed they had sealed. Well, what are your impressions regarding this unfolding situation? We eagerly anticipate reading your perspectives in the section below. If this deep dive into geopolitical strategy held your attention, please tap the like icon and mention that Wines of Thought steered you toward this analysis. We value every single interaction.